Most modern consumer cameras can shoot from 24 FPS all the way up to 240, but knowing when to choose what frame rate can be quite difficult. So today we're going to explore what frame rates to use and why you might want to use them. If you have any modern camera, chances are you can shoot anywhere from 24 frames a second all the way up to 240. And depending on that model, you can shoot it up to a maximum resolution of 4K. Even if you just have an iPhone, these days you can shoot up to 120 just on that small device. Being able to shoot at these different frame rates and these high frame rates has opened doors for videographers everywhere. It means you no longer have to go out and get a red cinema rig or those super high speed slow motion cameras to capture exactly what you need for your scene. Great, you can shoot up to 240 FPS, but why would you want to? What purpose does this serve for you? What even is FPS and what does it mean? In short, FPS means frames per second and the amount of frames that are going to be played back per second. 24 frames a second means there's 24 images being captured per second and then they're being played back to you in that exact same speed. Logically thinking, that then means if you're shooting at 240 FPS, you're having 240 frames captured every single second and then played back. Because cameras are super clever, they take all of this information, shove it together, and all those images being captured each second are being thrown back at you and being turned into a video. If you want to be super historic here, we can have a look back at history and have a look at a guy called Edward Muybridge, who was one of the first people to pioneer and push out to the general public the concept of moving images. You might remember him because he has that iconic video of the horses running, where basically he went out, photographed a horse running and photographed it as many frames as possible and put it on that turn disc and just got it spinning. And as everyone knows, that was one of the first amazing seeing, looking, moving images that we had as a society. And since then, technology just boomed. Fun fact, came from my hometown. With history covered and what FPS actually means, we're going to explore 3 frame rates today of 24, 60 and 120. And we're going to start off with 24. 24 FPS is the cinematic standard of frame rate. This frame rate is what 90% of everything that you consume and watch is shot at. All your movies, TV shows, most of your YouTube videos are all shot at 24 frames a second. 24 frames a second gives you the most accurate and most realistic looking motion blur. If you were to move your hand around in front of your face and then capture that on video, if you were filming at 24 frames a second with the 180-degree shuttable, which I mentioned in this video up here, generally speaking, it will look the same. This is what the eye can perceive and this is what the eye understand, and that is why things like 60 FPS and 120 FPS do look quite weird to the eye. I don't know the science or the accurate science behind it, but that's why they look weird and 24 frames a second looks perfectly normal to us. With 24 frames a second as well, you can ensure that all audio you are recording is going to be perfectly synced with that playback. As a standard, most sequences on things such as Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro are all 24 frames a second, and ensuring that your footage and your audio has both been shot in 24 frames a second means that both of those things are going to be perfectly accurately represented within that sequence. So if you're recording interviews or talking heads like a YouTube video here, or you're kind of recording normal sequences for your film or your documentary or your YouTube video, shoot most of them, like I said, shoot 90% of them at 24 frames a second and you'll get the most cinematic look, you'll get the most accurate playback to what the eye can perceive and what the eye enjoys and understands. The only time that you wouldn't want to shoot 24 frames a second is, generally speaking, if you want to slow things down. So now we're going to explore 60 FPS and 120 FPS. I'm going to lump these together because the concept is the same, they're just higher versions of the previous version. As I said, generally speaking, when you're editing footage in editing software, it's always going to be edited within a 24 FPS sequence. And as we know, if we're putting a 24 frame clip into a 24 frame sequence, it's going to play back exactly accurately. However, if you were to chuck a 60 or 120 FPS into a 24 frame sequence, you'll notice the playback becomes very choppy. In short, what's happening is the software is having to convert the footage from 60 frames to 24 frames. So it's cutting out exactly half of all of those frames. And if it's 120, then it's cutting out exactly 2/3 of all of those frames to make it play back. So if we're editing everything in a 24 frame a second and our 60 FPS playback is really, really stuttery, then why would we shoot in it? As I said previously, in short, slow motion. When you take 60 FPS footage and slow it down to 40% speed within your editing software, you will now get exactly 24 frames a second video in this very, very smooth slow motion sequence. The same with 120, if you take that and lower it down to 20%, you get an even slower and even smoother playback. This is basically 80% of the reason why you'd want to shoot at anything higher than 24 frames a second, just so you can slow it down in post and capture that movement in slow motion that you need. As always with videography and photography, rules are made to be broken, and there are some times where you don't want to do this and you want to just put a 60 FPS clip into a 24 frame rate sequence. And why is that? In short, it works for for the scene. If you look at films such as 300 or fitness videos or Game of Thrones, a lot of their big fight sequences and a lot of these fitness videos are shot in these higher frame rates because it gives it that gritty look. It makes you feel like you're there and everything's moving fast. Because it's cutting out frames, everything feels faster and more intense. So this is where pre-production comes in, and it is really, really imperative that you do this. Pre-production is the process of sitting down and then planning absolutely everything that you're going to be shooting. Just like I did for this video. You script it, you plan the angles and the positions of the shot, you plan what you're shooting on. Is it a drone, a camera, a GoPro? You plan all those things, and then you plan exactly what frame rates you're going to be shooting those at. If you're doing B-roll for your sequence, are you going to be shooting that at 24 or 60 or 120? Think about what you want out of this. Envision the entire video within your head. If you're a video maker and you're a videographer, chances are you're a very creative person, so you can see the video in your head before you've even created it. So write that down, note that down, put down somewhere on a document. Use things like Notion or Trello, or just write things down by hand. Plan out every single shot you're doing. For this video, I've planned out my talking head pieces here, and I know these are going to be 24 frames a second. And then I'm going to plan out all my B-roll for this video, and everything you've seen and everything you will see would have been pre-planned out beforehand. Even if you're just doing a vlog of your day, plan what you're doing, plan exactly what you're going to be capturing and how you're going to be capturing it, because then it means you know exactly how you're going to be using your footage afterwards when you're editing. And it doesn't have to be a big lengthy process. You can just get your phone and just write on there what you're going to be doing. For my cinematic vlog that I did recently, I planned every single shot. I said I want to get some shots of leaves. Well, I didn't know what kind of shots in those leaves, but I knew it was going to be 60 FPS, so I could slow it down to make it smooth. Small things like that will just come across in your videos that you've planned it so much better than you would have done if you hadn't done that, and the viewers will know you've done that as well. Pre-production is also important because when you start doing things such as client work, you need to ensure you're doing things professionally. I recently did a shoot with Zoe Smith, who's an Olympian here in Britain. To make this look as professional as possible, I knew I had to shoot that interview at 24 frames a second and nothing else. And then all the other sequences I could play around with. I shot some at 24, some at 60, and then I knew those at 60 I was going to slow down. But having that forethought and that pre-production process in your mind before going to the shoot will be imperative, especially if you do start doing professional client work. So make sure you are doing pre-production for any video, even TikToks. If you know the platform you're filming it on, then you can make it native to that, such as, you know, vertical camera. That's why my TikToks are so high quality. And that is frame rates for you, and why you should use them, and what ones there are, and what you could do with them basically. And in the short of it, it is just slow motion. That's why you would shoot anything higher. You do have the benefits of shooting 30 FPS, and if you get a 30 FPS clip and slow it down to 80%, you get a really kind of dreamy, weird looking slow motion sequence. A lot of music videos are shot like this. But the fundamental here is simply pre-production. Plan everything, and then you'll know what frame rate to use. Now we've gone over them, now you know when they're going to be used. Is it a fight sequence? Is it a slow motion sequence you want to capture? You now know what frame rate to use. So plan, do pre-production, just plan things before you do them, in short. Just, it's a good tip for life, really. So I hope you found this video useful. If you have, please do put a like, comment and a subscribe on the channel if you haven't already. And let me know, what do you generally shoot at? Do you shoot most of your videos at 24 or do you shoot some of them at 30? I shoot a lot of videos at 30 myself, if I'm entirely honest. So what do you shoot at? Let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, till next time, take care.